Hey folks, this is Kalani. With a new class just over the horizon, I figure it's the best time to answer that all-important question. What class should you, I, or anyone else play in World of Warcraft Legion? It's a pretty big one, and it's going to be very personal depending on who you are, what you enjoy, and what you want to get out of your $15 a month. To tackle this question, we're going to need to break it down a little and take it one step at a time. We've got 12 classes to choose from now, so we need to narrow it down. We're going to do that by looking at what you need to consider when choosing your avatar for exploring Azeroth. First up, we need to know what role we want to play. If you're new to this, there's currently 3 roles you can fill. The first is tanking, the folks who focus on keeping the enemy's attention. They're typically sturdier, with large health pools and defensive abilities to help protect their allies in the face of danger. Secondly, we have the healers. While the tank is protecting everyone, it's the healer's job to make sure everyone stays healthy and alive. If the tank dies, you can guarantee everyone else will follow pretty quickly, so the healers are just as important. Lastly, we have the damage dealers, or DPS. They're usually split into ranged DPS and melee DPS. The ranged DPS deal out damage from afar and typically play a little slower, having to stand still to cast spells that deal massive damage. On the flip side, we have the melee, who love to get up close and personal. Melee play a little faster, having to use their hack and slash abilities to chunk away at the enemy's health. Altogether, they make a perfect party. Tanks take the damage to keep everyone safe, healers keep everyone alive, while the DPS focus on dealing as much damage as possible to kill whatever target you're hunting for that sweet, sweet loot. Choosing your role is important because each class comes with 2 to 4 specializations which you can use to focus on tanking, healing, or dealing damage. Some classes can only deal damage, while others can tank, heal, or deal damage. Another important factor for picking a class is whether you want the choice to swap up your role. Picking a druid gives you the option to tank, heal, or deal damage, while picking a mage locks you into dealing damage even if you swap between all 3 specializations. The next thing to consider would be how the class looks. There's no point spending all this time playing a class if you don't like how they look, right? Each class can use one of 4 armor types: cloth, leather, mail, and plate. This limits what pieces of gear and equipment each class can use. If you like the look of leather gear, playing a cloth user might be a mistake. Other things to look at would be their spells, abilities, whether you use pets or not, and how their class fantasy shapes up. And if you end up playing a class, you have to enjoy how it actually plays. This is your dollar on the line. Make sure you're enjoying what you're paying for. So, now we know what we need to look for while scoping out the different classes, we're sure to find the perfect fit. Let's have a closer look at each spec in turn and see what's on offer. I'll also let you know how I feel about each class, but remember, this is my personal opinion. We're going to do this alphabetically for simplicity's sake. Death Knights are first on our table, and they're all about wielding the powers of death. If you're interested in the story of Arthas and him rising to power as the Lich King, a Death Knight might be right up your alley. They work with the powers of Blood, Frost, and Unholy, which happen to be the names of their specializations. You have runes, which are used to fuel your abilities, and generate runic power, which is used for the most powerful attacks. Their Blood specialization drains the life of their victims to sustain themselves, allowing a Blood Death Knight to persevere against impossible odds while keeping their allies safe. A Frost Death Knight uses powerful twin blades to deal massive direct damage. They can slow their enemies or even freeze them in place, making it very difficult for enemies to ever get away. The Unholy Death Knights fight a little differently, corrupting and decaying their enemy slowly but surely. They use diseases to rot their targets from the inside out. Death Knights wear plate gear, which can make them an imposing figure on the battlefield, clad in steel skulls and spikes. Blood Death Knights have always been strong in PvE, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. They're always the tank everybody loves to have. Frost and Unholy DPS have generally been good, though Unholy is typically a cut above Frost, with Frost being much easier to play. I think Death Knights are a pretty strong pick for new players, being both easy to pick up and very powerful in the right hands. I personally don't like the rune system Death Knights use and have a lot more fun on other classes. If you played back in the Burning Crusade, you'll definitely want to poke around on these guys, the formidable understudies of Illidan's Stormrage himself, the Illidari Demon Hunters. Using the destructive power of Fel Magic, the Demon Hunters lay waste to any and all who dare stand before their cursed eyes. You can focus on dealing damage in melee or tanking as a Demon Hunter, and you have one specialization for each. Havoc Demon Hunters wield awesome warglaives and practically dance around the battlefield, slashing and swiping as they go. They channel their inner demon to unleash crazy blasts of chaos damage or decimate all they can see with their eye beams. Vengeance Demon Hunters focus on their own pain and suffering to make sure none of their party comes to harm. They literally cut at the enemy's soul, consuming fragments of it to rejuvenate themselves. They control the battle with powerful sigils and char their targets with burning fire magic. Both specs can unleash their full demonic potential with metamorphosis. They literally turn into a demon, to deal more damage if you're Havoc, or take less damage if you're Vengeance. All Demon Hunters get something a little new too. They can double jump, anywhere, anytime. They also come well equipped with a pair of functional wings, allowing you to glide, or fall with style, from the highest mountaintops. They also have a whole new set of customization choices during character selection. They have special skin textures, horns, blindfolds, and even glowing tattoos. Demon Hunters are leather wearers, and their gear has a strong demonic focus. You can definitely see the Fel influence creeping in everywhere. Havoc Demon Hunters are currently amazing at dealing damage. They're shaping up to be one of the best melee DPS in both PvE and PvP. Vengeance is also looking very good, an incredibly mobile tank with very good defensive skills that can self-heal for a lot with the right talents. I'll definitely be picking up a Demon Hunter for Legion, even if it's just an alt. They're so cool. Druids are an interesting class because you can fill any and every role as you see fit. You can tank as a Guardian, heal as Restoration, melee DPS as Feral, and even range DPS as Balance. That makes them the perfect choice if you feel the need to fill every role, or if you feel like you might get bored of only having one role to fill. Guardian Druids turn into massive bears to soak up enormous amounts of damage while mauling and thrashing their enemies. Restoration Druids call upon the powers of nature to rejuvenate their allies, focusing on strong heal over time spells. Feral Druids use their cat claws to rend and tear their foes' flesh, causing damage through several open wound bleed effects. Balanced Druids channel the power of lunar and solar energies to supercharge their astral abilities, which they can unleash for devastating damage. No matter what form you decide to take on, you'll be in leather armor, most of which reflects the nature aspect of Druids, even going so far as to emulate the different animals that make Druids so special. Druids are always a great choice because you'll always be welcome in any group for pretty much any activity because you can fill every role and usually do it very well. Guardian tanks are a good pick right now with their high health pools and strong defensive cooldowns. Feral Druids have typically been the more complicated DPS spec but have always done high damage in both raiding and PvP. Balance is simpler than previous expansion and has some cool flashy abilities, but Restoration is where Druid truly shines. Their heal over time playstyle makes them incredible wherever they're needed, whether that be 5-man groups, 30-man raiding, or PvP environments. If you're stuck deciding and you know you want to be a healer, Druid is going to be a good pick this time around. I'm really excited for Druid and I really enjoy the healing playstyle. The other specs don't interest me too much, as I prefer how other classes play in those specs. Hunters have changed quite a bit over the years. Going into Legion is no exception. Hunters are close to nature too, though not in the exact same way as Druids are. They know the lay of the land and the animals who inhabit it. They can track their way through any terrain in pursuit of any target. All three specs are tooled towards doing damage, but you have a choice of ranged or melee. Marksmanship focuses on high-powered bow attacks, forcing your enemies to kneel before your relentless barrages. Beast Mastery plays more with pets and the special bond between them and the hunter, calling forth stampedes of loyal beasts to crush everything in your path. They're also more free to move and jump around while commanding their beasts to bite and claw your target. Survival is the twist. Using traps, a loyal pet, and melee weapons, you take the fight up close and personal, relying on your wits and reactions to stay safe and dish out the damage. Survival has turned out quite complicated, with very powerful attacks that do more damage every time you strike. Whether ranged or melee, hunters wear mail gear. Their gear is quite interesting and varied, so you'll be sure to find something you love. Hunters have historically been the reliable ranged DPS capable of completing any number of random personal missions in raid encounters. If there's something special to be done, half the time it's the hunter that takes care of it. Right now, every spec is doing quite well, and you can play the way you want to. Marksman deals very strong single target damage and can take out targets which are spread out. That's their main advantage. Beast Mastery also does very strong damage, but their main strength comes when a lot of enemies are clustered very close together. They each fill their little niche, which makes choosing between them both fun and difficult at times. Survival is a different beast. It's very complicated playstyle, and it doesn't pay off all that well. It's definitely interesting, but I don't think we'll see too many floating around unless they up the damage at least a little bit. I've played Hunter as a main for a long while now, and will continue to do so. They're the only ranged DPS that doesn't have to stand still all the time to do damage, which is how I like to play. I'll be sure to pick up one or two alts to make sure I don't get too bored though. Mages are always a solid choice if you want to be a ranged DPS. All 3 specs are well equipped to destroy their enemies from afar with devastating spells. Your specialization dictates what types of spells you'll be flinging. There's Fire Mages, who focus on setting foes alight with scorching flames and chaining critical strikes to unleash their strongest abilities in an instant. Frost Mages, who take the opposite approach, freezing their targets solid and pummeling them with torrents of icicles. Arcane walks a different path, honing their mana expertly to build up unstoppable energy to blast their enemies over and over until their mana is depleted. Mages are also capable of teleporting all over the world, even to Outland. They can also tear open portals for others to traverse the world quickly. Mages adorn themselves with cloth armor, empowering their magic capabilities at the expense of defense. They're called glass cannons for a reason. Staying away from the danger is what they do best. Blowing up where they're running away from is a close second. Fire has always been my favourite spec to play with, and it usually does a lot of damage with very cool spell effects. Getting those critical strikes in to be able to instantly cast Parablast is incredibly satisfying. Frost is a little weirder, because it always dominates PvP, but it's typically left behind in PvE and raid environments. They utilise a lot of slowing and freezing effects to crowd control multiple people, while constantly chipping away at health bars. It has its moments in PvE, but they're few and far between, which is the opposite of Arcane. Arcane is always super strong, which can actually put people off Mage quite a bit, as it's not the most exciting spec to play. It isn't as flashy or cool to look at as the others, and usually consists of 2 to 4 buttons. No matter what happens, Mage is always a strong pick. At least one of their specs is usually in the top few for damage, and they're always welcome in every aspect of the game. If you're happy standing still to cast and want to be a ranged DPS, Mage is a solid go-to. Monks were the newest class before Demon Hunters rolled around, and they've got a few cool quirks of their own. They're capable of tanking as Brewmasters, healing as Mistweavers, and DPSing in melee as Windwalkers. Each spec draws a crazy amount of inspiration from the Pandaren race and the Mists of Pandaria expansion, which is very heavily Asian themed. That means you're chugging brews and throwing kegs as a brewmaster, staggering around to avoid attacks while provoking everyone around you. The drunker you are, the better you tank. Brewmasters follow in the footsteps of Nizao, the Black Ox, a steadfast and stubborn spirit which they can call upon in desperate times. Mistweavers channel soothing energy with the help of their Jade Serpent statues to keep allies refreshed and healthy. Healing monks have quite a few heal over time abilities as well, though nowhere near as many as Restoration Druids. They have a decent middle ground, keeping the heals coming from a variety of spell types. Mistweavers have their own form of refreshing beverage in their teas, which can provide extra mana for heals or supercharge some healing spells. Mistweavers follow the teachings of Chiji, the Red Crane, who they can call upon to help heal their allies in a pinch. Windwalkers, all you might expect from a monk who wants to deal damage, martial arts kicks and punches with a bit of rolling around, or if you're feeling super fancy, a flying serpent kick. Windwalker monks combo their attacks to deal massive amounts of damage. Monks are a leather user, and the same themes which permeate their spells and abilities is very clear in their gear sets, which can make for some very beautiful weapons and armour. Brewmasters are an interesting spec to play because staggering is actually a thing. You take damage over time instead of damage directly. That makes them a lot easier to heal unless that damage gets overwhelming. That's why their playstyle revolves around managing that staggered damage, drinking brews to reduce and remove it where possible. Mistweavers have a few unique quirks of their own. They infuse targets with healing mists and jolts of powerful chi energy. They can even choose to weave in a few punches in melee to add some damage to their rotation while keeping everyone alive. It's an interesting playstyle, to say the least, one you definitely have to get used to and enjoy if you really want to give Mistweaver a shot. Windwalker plays really smoothly these days, which is awesome to see. They punch, kick and spin to deal a decent amount of damage. I know in the past Windwalkers have been a little low on the damage side unless a fight has multiple targets. If they have more than one target, they can really bring the DPS. I'm not really fond of the monk theme or playstyle of any spec really, but I'm sure plenty of folks out there enjoy them. Paladins are another class which can fill every role, and the DPS spec is also melee only. Wielding the powers of Holy Light, Paladins can focus their attention on keeping allies safe with the Protection spec, smite their foes with slashes and strikes in the Retribution spec, or channel the light through themselves to heal allies as the Holy spec. Paladins are a plate-wearing class, so they're pretty sturdy no matter what. Their gear sets are some of the coolest armour, usually sporting glowing lights and jewels. Protection Paladins are super cool. They throw their shield, which bounces between enemies before returning to the player. You're basically Captain America. They use strong holy-based protection spells to ward off damage and can be really fun to play. Personally, Protection is one of my favourite tanking specs because of how much focus goes into your shield. Many of the main abilities revolve around charging your shield with divine holy energies, which reinforce the Holy Guardian that protects everything feel of the spec. Retribution is a little wonky in Legion, which is quite disappointing because it's usually a fun spec to play. Retribution fills the Holy Warrior archetype and has a special resource called Holy Power. You generate Holy Power with several abilities and spend it on your most powerful strikes. From what I understand, it's not in an amazing place right now, both in terms of how it actually plays and how much damage it can kick out, which a lot of players are unhappy about. Holy Paladins are very potent healers, capable of applying special buffs called beacons to a few allies, which copies a good chunk of their healing to that target, allowing them to heal up to 3 targets with almost no worry. They are one of the best tank healers around and are much sought after. There's also a huge array of utility buffs Holy Paladins can provide in the form of blessings and auras, which makes them capable of dealing with a variety of problems thrown at your group. All in all, Paladins are a good choice if you're interested in tanking or healing, and if you enjoy Retribution as it is, there's nothing holding you back. I'll personally keep my Paladin on the back burner as I'm not thrilled with Ret, and it's the only DPS spec they have. Priests are one of the hot topics of this expansion as they've got some new mechanics to work with. They can heal and DPS even at the same time. Their Discipline spec takes a bit of a support approach to healing as they have tools to heal allies based on the damage they deal to enemies. If you want to focus on just healing, Priests also have a Holy spec. Holy Priests channel the same holy light as Paladins, they just use it a little differently. They have strong area of effect healing spells, allowing them to take care of the entire group at the same time. Their Devout Belief can rescue allies from certain death. Priests also have a DPS spec called Shadow. They're definitely the light and dark class in the game. Shadow draws upon the power of the Void, a limitless darkness full of untold horrors. It's not entirely safe either. The spells they cast cause the priest to slowly slip into insanity. While that may seem like a bad thing, an insane Shadow Priest is also very dangerous, casting dark magic no other mind could even comprehend. As a typical caster, priests equip themselves with cloth armor. It's the intelligent thing to do, and their sets usually reflect their holy discipline or the madness within. Discipline's halfway playstyle has a lot of players excited. They use shields and healing abilities to apply a unique buff called Atonement. Whenever the priest deals damage, anyone who has Atonement will be healed at the same time. It's not the first time this interaction has been seen in WoW, but it's the first time an entire spec revolves around it. Healers can always throw a bit of damage in when they don't have anything else to do, but Discipline Priests are going to actively be a part of the DPS group while also being a part of the healing group. Holy Priests are almost the standard healer. They have average heal over time capabilities, average direct healing, but very strong AoE healing. All in all, they can keep a group up pretty smoothly. Add in the strong cooldowns they can bring to a raid and they're definitely a good pick. Shadow is both incredibly fun and does amazing damage. They focus on damage over time spells with strong single target nukes to build up their insanity level. When they're sufficiently insane, they can unleash all the stored up power to use spells straight from the void, which deal even more damage. It's a bit of a racing game, as your insanity will deplete faster and faster, and to stay in your void-like state, you'll need to keep your insanity from reaching zero. Eventually you're going to have to accept that you're once again sane, but not before you deal as much damage as possible. Priests have always interested me a little, but I've never sat down to actively play one much. Discipline and Shadow are the reason that's going to change in Legion. Rogues are the swashbuckling, backstabbing outlaw or thief class in WoW. They'll pick your pockets and vanish into thin air, if only you could pick other players' pockets. Rogues are damage dealers. They have no interest in tanking or healing unless it's to heal themselves. They can focus on attacking from the shadows with the subtlety spec, slowly kill their target with poison and bleed effects as masters of assassination, or go toe-to-toe with their foes in the outlaw spec. Whatever specialization, rogues come loaded with enough tools to cheat their way to victory. As long as they win, that's all that matters. Rogues have a special resource called combo points, which they generate with most of their abilities. These combo points can be spent on a variety of finisher moves which increase in power the more combo points are spent on them. Rogues use leather gear, anything heavier would just slow them down. Their sets play on their preference to stay anonymous and hidden, while having an easily accessible dagger here and there. Subtlety has always been the PvP spec. It specialises in staying in stealth as much as possible and destroying targets as quickly as possible, then returning to stealth to go find someone else to surprise. Assassination puts sharp daggers to good use, inflicting deadly poisons and opening multiple wounds to stack up damage over time effects. They excel when they don't have to change target much, but smart players can apply their poisons and bleeds across several enemies to really dish out the damage. Outlaw uses swords and axes instead of daggers to ramp up their combo points as quickly as possible and use as many finishing moves as they can. If you want to sneak around and play the Thief, Rogues are where you'll feel at home. Their DPS specs are sufficiently different to keep things fun and interesting, but I personally don't care too much for the random factors that the Outlaw spec has to deal with, and that's the spec that interests me the most. Shamans call upon the elements to assist them in their endeavours, whether that be keeping allies alive with their restoration spec, or trying to destroy their foes with the elemental and enhancement specs. Restoration focuses the element of water to cast replenishing spells for all of their group members, while elemental channels the elements of air and fire to constantly assault their foes with lightning bolts and lava bursts from ranged. Enhancement Shamans get up close and personal in melee, dual-wielding weapons which they infuse with flames and earth to deal extra damage. They also call upon the element of air to increase their attack speed and to strike multiple times in quick succession. The unique tools Shaman get to play with are their totems. You can pick and choose which totems you want to use, and you can end up with a selection of over 6. Each one has its own uses and can provide anything from a massive AoE heal, a large movement speed boost for your entire group, or even turn every enemy around you into frogs. Using the right totem at the right time could turn the tide in any dungeon, raid, or battleground. Shamans equip themselves with mail gear, the only other class to do so besides hunters. Their gear is also some of the coolest in game, focusing on showing off the theme of each element. Restoration is a really powerful healing spec. They have so many little tricks with totems and can honestly save the day so many times in a single encounter. Their heals also heal for more the lower health their target is, so they really shine when your group is in a pinch. They focus on healing a lot of people at the same time with heals that chain between allies. Elemental Shamans are typically middle of the pack for damage. They seem to never really shine in any type of fight, though they can deal quite a bit of damage when 2 or 3 targets are present. They only really have a few spells that they consistently use as well. Enhancement makes up for anything wrong with Elemental though. They enhance their weapons with so many buffs that add up to deal very high, reliable damage, and it's a blast to play. If I enjoyed Restoration Elemental more, I would probably play Shaman as my main character. Warlocks are the dark arts version of mages. Where mages use pure magic of fire, frost and arcane, warlocks make use of darker magic to curse their foes and control demons. They have 3 very different specs: Affliction, which focuses on damage over time, curse and corruption spells; Demonology, which calls forth armies of demons from beyond the nether to bite, carve and explode in the enemy's face; and lastly Destruction, which focuses on very strong fire magic to decimate their foes. Warlocks are the last cloth-wearing class on the list and boast some of the most sought-after pieces of gear in their sets. Warlock gear is often very dark and demonic and usually looks absolutely badass. They also have their own resource called Soul Shards. These shards are the stolen souls of their slain foes given a physical form. They power the Warlock's most important abilities. Affliction Warlocks do very well in most aspects of the game due to their damage over time focus. They can throw out several spells onto multiple enemies and have them all ticking away, doing an absurd amount of damage. Demonology is one of the most interesting specs for a caster DPS. It plays much like the Beast Mastery Hunter in that you summon strong demons to fight alongside you, as well as throwing hordes of lesser demons at your targets. They also have spells and abilities that do more damage the more demons you have active. Not only are they fun to play, but they do so much damage it's any wonder people consider playing the other specs. Destruction plays much more like a mage. It's kind of a fire mage with a bit of fell magic added in. They lash out with strong fire magic and use their soul shards on destructive chaos bolts, which is one of the most powerful abilities in the entire game. Warlocks in general are a less static caster due to how many instant spells they have, but you'll probably end up staying still the majority of the time anyways. While I love how Warlocks play and how their gear and spells look, I just don't feel any sort of connection with the class itself. Warriors are the first class a lot of people start with. They're the one class that almost every game has in one form or another. Take up arms with your favourite two-handed weapon as an arms warrior, thrash about like a berserker as a fury warrior, or take up a sword and board and protect your allies as the protection warrior. No matter what spec you play, you'll focus on physical strength and attributes to do what needs to be done. You won't find any spells in a warrior's arsenal. Warriors stomp around in plate gear which can vary from flaming steel pauldrons to spikes and blades mounted on every inch of metal. Warriors are best known for charging around the battlefield. They can get to where they want to incredibly quickly with the use of their many charge abilities and heroic leap. They're also the only class in the game to use Rage, a resource which is generated by dealing and taking damage. This Rage fuels your powerful abilities as Arms and Fury, or your strong defensive abilities as Protection. Arms warriors favour using a single two-handed weapon to hack and slash their foes to pieces. They smash their foes' armour and cut through defences with ease. They're very good at dealing high burst damage to a single target thanks to their short cooldowns and can deal a crazy amount of AoE damage. Fury warriors take things a bit further by using two-handed weapons. Crazy, I know, but that's just how strong they are, swinging each heavy blade to slice and dice enemies as they enrage to deal bonus damage. Fury is amazing at bursting down targets and can swap targets with basically no penalty, making them very versatile in raids and very dangerous in PvP. The only issue I have with warrior DPS specs is that they're always limited by one thing or another. Arms is heavily limited by its rage generation. If you don't generate enough, you can be sat there without a button to push. Fury is heavily limited by its enrage buff, which can be quite sporadic, leaving the spec to be a little hit or miss. Protection warriors are the original tanks, but don't feel all too special given how many different options we have these days. Warriors have always been the best pick for those interested in smashing monsters' faces in with the biggest weapon they can find, and they're really good at what they do. I just personally don't care too much for them. So that's all the classes available in World of Warcraft right now and how they play. Hopefully that gives you a good general idea about each and every class. With what we discussed earlier in mind, you should be able to narrow down your choice a little and find the perfect class for you. I'll stick with my Hunter for now, and will definitely pick up a Demon Hunter too. There may even be room for a Druid and a Priest, who knows. Let me know what class you think works for you, or what class you're playing right now. If you have any questions or queries, please leave them in the comment section below, and I'll try to get back to you. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave. If you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always, I will see you next time.